All right, so I look at this. It says teaching, but think about it. Teaching that leads to effective change should be less informational and more transformational. And I said effective learning, should be less informational, more transformational. Informational learning is what Paulo Freire called the bank deposit approach to education, where you just make deposits and at some point you use a test paper to make withdrawal. There is nothing that says any sort of real change has occurred because I have reproduced information in any teaching learning situation. So you give me in any context that you're teaching, the information that you pass to me and I'm able to return the information to you when you ask for it. Is that an indication that learning has taken place? Certainly not in a transformational learning context. We catch that?
Don't move. Question.
Mathematics is quantitative reason. It is quantitative reason, and the reason why it's so difficult for a lot of people to learn math is because we don't, it's never taught as quantitative reasoning, and it is.
Exactly.
So, and if you reflect on math class, you'd have done simultaneous equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a definition for simultaneous equation? Did you get notes in your math class? You're a good math teacher.
Yeah.
So you throw numbers at people. The formula. But did you get a definition?
No.
Did you know it applies in the real world?
No.
Right.
So what was missing is the cognitive element and the affective. They just focus on the psychomotor. These are the steps in solving the equation.
I'm thinking of transforming your
I will.
concept in relation.
Say that again?
I'm thinking of the concept
Uh-huh.
that you're articulating in relation to the STEM.
Well, in a subtle way we are, but if you have 10 items in bag A and 10 items in bag B, then think of the reasoning. If you put both together, then you will have,
20.
isn't that reasoning?
Yeah.
It's quantitative reasoning.
Quantitative.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It's quantitative reasoning. So, alright, so informational learning, it only adds to what you know. So you pour information, Paulo Freire said you make deposits, and at some point you make withdrawal. Transformational learning targets changing the way learners make meaning. So you're going to use the information, to go back to what Marjorie asked, information is important in the transformational learning process. But you're going to use the information to make, it's going to be transformational theory as one of its underpinning, the constructivist notion. So, I have to touch this and wait 5 minutes for the next slide to come up. So, I am saying that because the principal is present. And that's what they wanted to touch
But it's
screen.
also a factor.
So, all right, this shouldn't be new. This is, all right, that's informational learning. And we were saying before the learning intervention, notice what's going on. And then after the learning intervention, notice the change. There is change. Again, we were saying what kind of change? There is more information in the same frame. It's a thing that says more information into the same mindset. You know what has not changed? The mindset of the learners have not changed. Come exam time, they will pour out the information on the exam paper, but they will leave the teaching learning situation with the same mindset. Why? Because you did not venture into the effective where they would be required to use the information to go into critical reflection. And when you go into critical reflection, that's the initiation point for perspective transformation, which is a prerequisite for behavioral change. Now, this we say, sometimes you don't need to give people more information. I really, in terms of my teaching learning role, I do not go to classes and give notes. You get the information before class time. You read it, and when you come to class, we're going to talk about how you can use this information. But you don't give it in the class. Classroom time is so valuable for me to be writing notes on a whiteboard, or for me to be dictating notes to you. Well, you can't be generalized, because again, you might be, if you're working with self-directed learners, or learners who should be, then you read a chapter. When you come to class, I have role play simulation, those kind of things in place, so we're going to use the information so they get a real sense as to how the information is applied in a sort of real world context. Alright? So, after the teaching learning intervention with the same amount of information, the theory is saying that look what you get. The meaning making process has changed. So a lot of times, we did a trainer for the people from one of those government ministries, I think Ministry of Health, I think, and they were complaining that they give out lots of information in communities about HIV awareness, and people are not changing their behavior. You know what the problem is? They were being informational. They were being informational. Informational learning has no real effect on fundamental behavior.
Especially if they can't read the information.
That again. So when you do those kind of interventions where your mission is to bring about behavioral change, you have to be transformational. And so we're saying, we're guided by the C, we say use the transformational learning strategies. So what is transformation or transformative learning? Learning that occurs when individuals do what? Change their
Framework.
Not when they know more, when they change their by
critically reflecting on
their assumptions and beliefs.
consciously making and implementing that.
So this comes to one big question, and I'm going to talk to people who are in supervisor role, but for educators, trainers, do you teach in the affective? Do you set up are your classrooms at times emotionally charged?
Yes.
If you're in the affective, it has to be emotionally charged. Okay, so if you're doing that, so values, beliefs, and convictions. Question go.
Definition by?
Yeah, say it again.
Definition by?
Jack Mesereau. Forgive me, I should have said that. Jack Mesereau. Died last year, yeah.
How you spell the last name?
M-E-Z-I-R-O-W.
M-E-
Z-I. Same thing he calls it.
It's critical. It's about critical.
R-O-W. Yes. So think about this now. Let's go back to the person coming to work late. The person has been observed to be coming to work late, so punctuality is not an important thing. So that's a behavioral pattern. Stay with the process. That's a behavioral pattern that you observe. So you went about trying to change the negative behavior that you did not like. And so what did you do? You had a meeting, and you made it known to the individual that if you come to work late,
A memo.
one more time, you are going to be suspended without pay. Now I am fearful of being suspended without pay, so I will show up to work. There's no indication in that my beliefs and values and convictions about punctuality have changed. I am just responding to the threat. So that is what we call change by exception. Or we go to the definition that we have here and say, if you're going for transformation or paradigm change, your first step would not have been something to talk about something that is sort of punitive. Good? But to think in a sort of constructive way as to, I wonder what underpins that behavior. It always starts out with transformation. Again, it's theoretical, sometimes to the point where some people think it's ridiculous, but if you're going for transformation, there's a simple concept that says, instead of trying to suppress the behavior, which is what you're doing with change by exception, I'm going for the root causes of the behavior. And to go for the root causes, you have to understand what those are, because the theory, we're coming from the theoretical construct which says the behavior that you're observing is underpinned by something.
So,
And if you find out, or several things, or combination of, and if you find out what those are, and if you're able to alter those, the behavior will modify.
So,
And then that will be, quote unquote, real change. That will be transformation.
so is it that is why persons are referred to the counselor
Yes.
when you have a behavioral problem?
Yeah.
Because maybe the supervisor does not have the time, the energy, the
Competences.
emotions,
Right.
the competencies.
That's why, let me tell you
All
an
of
example.
those to
And the skills.
invest.
Right, that's
So
what
you
I'm
say,
supposed to
all right,
think.
I'm going to refer you to somebody who can do the transformation.
And the reason might be because you probably, for the last 10 times, you have
Yes.
tried to impose consequences, and you're not seeing any behavioral change because I'm not fearful. The example I use, everybody knows Bounty Killer, DJ. Remember he was sent to behavior modification school by one judge?
Yeah.
After being fined and confined several times for
Yeah.
using indecent language on the stage, and the
Yeah.
judge was basically saying, when we related to the theory, you're not fearful of consequences. So I am mandating you to go to behavior modification school. Now when you go to behavior modification school, they won't give you a ticket. The process becomes, wonder what sustains this behavior. Believing in the thing that says if the underpinnings change, the behavior will modify. Now, the sort of a very difficult to treat with part of this is, and go back to what we mentioned earlier about the things you learn in traditional schooling, or primary, secondary schooling, and the things they did not really teach us, values and so on. There was no class called values and beliefs. There was a math class and a literature class and so on. So you learned your beliefs and your values passively. You acquire them passively. But over time, they become fundamental and they drive your behavior. Now, when you engage with an individual, even at a very basic level where you're just supervising someone in a little unit that you run to be, but there's a behavior that is just there and you can't deal with it anymore. You've tried several things that the person is just not conforming. That's the word that they use. The individual who is displaying that behavior might have no real sense as to what the underpinnings are. Because again, you learn them
Subconsciously.
so part of what the counselor might do when you go in and so on, they are trying to bring you to a sense as to what you believe. Zoya? Sometimes you're not even aware because these are all passive acquisitions. And so the first step becomes in the I hope this works. So there's a process. And again, we're talking about a theory, right? So just bear with me. We can't tell you. The theory says if you're trying to bring about change, and now I can talk about teachers and supervisors, you start with identifying the schemas, the underpinning schemas. Let me just put this picture up. So again, you don't start by saying, come to a meeting, I notice you're coming late, and I want you to know as of now that if you come late again, you're going to. So we're not going, I'm not saying you should throw change by exception out the window. You need to use that to have, it can't seem as if being said is in charge of the asylum.
Somewhere, and then you come to that
yes, you have to
realization.
use it to hold things in place.
And you come to that realization.
So but while you're doing that, you need to think in a sort of developmental way.
I think one colloquial term that they use is not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yes. So, it says, start by identifying, come to a sense as to what sustains, what the underpinnings are. And again, how are you going to get there? There must be a bridge between you and the individual. And if you're not talking to the individual, or you attack my behavior, and I'm resentful of your having attacked my behavior, then I am not going to be in discourse with you. Transformation, a paradigm change requires that there must be a relationship because conversation is important. Go.
Question, suppose a person don't really have any belief or value about it, don't really know.
There's no such human being.
You can't express what.
Possibly, because they're passive acquisitions, you're not aware as to what they are. But, I mean, and again, some of the time, the teaching learning process becomes a mission of helping people to discover who they are. That's an important part of teaching learning.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can use teaching learning activities, and when people engage in those activities, then they're called upon to say what they believe. And probably it's the first time, relative to whatever notion you're treating with, probably the first time that someone is going to be attending to, what do I really believe? How did I come to believe this? So, identify schemas is step one. Then we say engage in critical reflection. There are two approaches for engaging in critical reflection. One we call objective reframing, the other we call subjective reframing. Objective reframing meaning everything that you acquired from the external world, outside of you. Subjective reframing, you're going to visit with your own intuitive ideals. You're going to bring them into sharp focus. You're probably going to find out for the first time what they are, but you're going to reflect on them. Now, the theory says, this is where it begins. When an individual starts to reflect critically on whatever he or she believes, that's a starting point. And it might very well be the point of no return. So tell you what I have done. In classroom situation, well, the theory said if you reflect critically on any belief that you own, you place that belief at risk of changing. So because whenever I do critical thinking workshop, transformational learning workshop, and I'm trying to use real life examples to bring out a point, we'll do two of those today. I try not to use anything religious or denominational because it might not be appropriate. Because a lot of people, a lot of people come to their religious convictions because they were brought up in a particular way. So it was, in a real way, passive acquisition. But you get to a point where you don't want to question it. And you probably don't want to invite people to question those kinds of things. And I'm saying theoretical constructs are real. If you engage in a real way with transformative theory, you're going to go into critical reflection. And if you believe anything religious, and you, based on the theory, if you subject that religious belief to the critical reflective process, the theory says you're placing your belief at risk of changing.
Sure.
But you see, that theory saying that all beliefs can be changed.
Well, it says at risk of change, and it does not generalize, because the theory also says that human beings do not change fundamental beliefs unless they experience a disorienting dilemma. So disorienting dilemma means something real life. You've been behaving a particular way, you would not stop. You smoke, you would not stop. You're caught up in a medical facility, and they say if you don't stop, you're going to die. Now you're in a dilemma, which might be sufficient to disorient you. So where we are? Now we impose disorienting dilemma situations in classrooms, certainly not those that are life-threatening, but you can use learning activities to impose sort of disorienting dilemma for students that will get them to abandon whatever belief system they're guided by and to try on, the Stephen Brookfield's notion I like, they let them try on another belief system for the purpose of the teaching learning situation. This is your equivalent to what they will do in the chemistry lab and so on, because you're in social science. So our equivalent is to get people to reflect on what they believe and value. You're not going to be mixing up anything in test tubes and so on, because you're not in the pure natural science. But you have that right, that leverage in a classroom to give learners assignment or teaching learning in teaching learning situations, to invite learners to put aside what they believe about the teaching learning process or about any notion in education and to try on another perspective. And it might be a situation, it's the very first time that the individual is trying on a different perspective.
Yes.
Right?
What did you do about the teacher who said that you must never let your student know that you don't know?
I had him try on a different perspective.
Right, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I had him try on a different perspective, and it really went profound, because we're going to use another strategy. But again, that's a belief system. So you don't attack the belief, because that's going to have no consequence. Attacking someone's belief. Then, because if you attack what I believe, I'm just going to defend it.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to be transformational. And I follow the theory which says, I wonder what sustains us or that.
Yes.
So then you have to engage the individual. All right, so you get objective reframing subjective. Whatever you believe, where did you get them from? Are they intuitive, subjective idealism, or is something that you got from someone? Sometimes people who we have respect for, because teaching learning situations, again, the positionality is real in a classroom situation, and sometimes you really like a teacher, and because as a learner you might be impressionable minded, so anything that comes from someone who is sort of quote-unquote authority figure in your life, then you tend to be guided by that. So we're saying those you need to subject to objective reframing. Okay? So, go back to the process. Again, identify, let them critically reflect on. If you get past critical reflection, then it will lead to what we call a perspective transformation. So if you reflect critically on your beliefs and values, and those start to modify, then you end up with a perspective transformation. So you have a new perspective. Go back to the teacher. The mission is to help him to realize a new perspective.
Yeah.
So, and that's just the step before the transformation, which is the revised meaning structure will take place. So you take a conscious decision to revise. So we're going to pause because there's an activity that I need to use to bring this out. Now, you can literally pick up, when someone has undergone a perspective transformation, it's something that they cannot really keep quiet. And then people will start to talk about their new normal way of thinking. They will confront you in ways that might be frightening to you. You say, well, that's not you. How come you're talking like that? But it's not me talking like that. It's the fact that I have undergone a perspective transformation. You don't realize. And in the real world, people change political persuasion. People change religious persuasion. People become what the new buzz term in the 21st, people become radicalized and so on. You wonder, how on earth can someone leave a suburban community in the US and end up working for a perspective transformation has occurred? It's real. All right, so go for
I
it.
have a question.
Go for the question.
One of the challenges that we're having is that when our students go out and we learn all of these nice things we teach them together,
Right.
and so on, they go into the classroom and the teachers are saying to them,
The teachers?
yes, that you need to conform to our way of doing things. Meaning
Okay.
that, for example, you come here giving people notes, you're spoiling them.
Right.
You come here teaching, you're spoiling them. We're not used to that. We don't want you to spoil them and then leave them on us.
Right.
And so you find that
The culture is different.
there's a culture difference.
Yeah.
And then what really happens? Do our students change to be like what is happening in the classroom now, or do they try to transform?
Well, again, if we are, what is important to me, and I caution students, because I tend to, your own core beliefs and convictions will shape the way you teach. And I caution my, because I impose a lot of transformational learning notions on students. But I caution them that when you get into the real world, you might not, or you might find that people have different belief systems and so on. But if you're trained to be a skillful facilitator, if you're really grounded in the concepts of facilitation, transformational learning and so on, then you know how to treat with whatever the cultural tenets are in any situation that you're operating. Because you'll know, for example, up front that, look, whoever's approaching me and telling me that this is not how we do things, that person is also operating on the basis that he or she is really grounded in certain beliefs and conviction. So what is presented to you is a particular reality that is not consistent with your own. That is no different than how you were trained. That in your training you're told that there are different realities. Good? Whatever you're observing, don't take it at face value. It's deep-rooted. So in the real world situation, what is your purpose? That is what I want what I would want my student our student who was trained by me to be, how I want the student to be operating. When you're confronted in that way, do not attack it. Do not attack the behavior, right? Because then you're going to build up resentment.
Right.
So do you change if they're just conforming to what you told them at the VTDI, then anybody can move them in any direction when they get out there.
Right.
But if you train them from the ground up,
Right.
then they're rooted in their fundamental conviction that this is how I'm supposed to attend to learners. And so I'm not easily swayed.
Yeah.
Go for the question.
To what extent does a very pinpointed knowledge of self impact the operations of this theory? Because you're talking about paradigm shifts
Right,
and changes because there are shifts in paradigm.
right. Because the root cause of change.
Good. You're
Yeah.
talking about values and belief systems. But if an individual is not so attuned to their belief system in the first place, and many of us
Are not.
are not, right?
Right.
Will the intervention impact them?
But a part of the intervention is, again, you start with inviting individuals
Okay.
to participate in a process
So that
which
you
will
have a-
deliberately bring them to a realization as to
Their
what
own-
their core beliefs and values are.
Okay.
That's the starting point if you're taking a transformational approach.
Mm.
Okay? Now, we're going to do this first exercise. I want you to pair up with someone. It has two purposes. One is for you to come to a sense as to what your beliefs and values are about anything, and you're going to make some assumptions about a
Money
colleague.
is on the ground.
Money is on the ground.
You want it to grow?
An indication of economic turnaround. All right, pair up with someone who you know very well in the working environment. Pair up with someone. Pair up with someone. This is a bit emotionally charged, so yes. But I want you to pair up with someone. Wait a couple minutes. I will go through it. Yes, it's all We're gonna uncover. How you saying it up? Right. Uncover beliefs that shape reality. We're gonna do this one. Start. Pair up with a colleague. Pair up with a colleague. Have you done that? Everybody on board?
Yeah.
This might be a little bit emotionally charged, but it's your experience in this here. Okay. The next thing. For step 2, having observed your colleague in the workplace for months or even years, or how long you know the person, you're going to, you can walk away from the person for right now because you're going to write something. You might not want to be very close to the person when you write it. You're going to describe a behavioral pattern or an action that you have noticed to be typical of your colleague.
It's not funny.
Absolutely. It's emotionally charged teaching. So I want you to describe that. The person will, it's the first time the individual will know that you've been observing this. So we come to sort of aha moment. Alright? So if you're more comfortable shifting just to write and concentrate. Third, you're going to, let me go to the third step. Specific to the action or behavioral pattern you have described above, you're going to make 2 assumptions for me. You're going to make 2 assumptions as to why, what you think are the beliefs that are underpinning that behavior. So I noticed that so and so over lunchtime you will do so and so. And so that's an observation. And then you will make 2 assumptions. So because we make assumptions about it, right? Then after you've made those assumptions and having described the behavior that you observe, you're going to confront your colleague. And this is when it gets emotionally
Give us
charged.
another sheet here.
This is when it gets a little bit emotionally charged because you're going to reveal to your colleague what you've been observing. You know what I want? you're going to reveal to your colleague what you've been observing, and you're also going to make known to your colleague what your assumptions are as to why he or she behaves that way. And then your colleague is going, what is the last part? Can you read the
I'm to read it.
yeah, you can read it.
The actual beliefs that he or she is guided by relative to the said action behavioral pattern.
Right.
And report your findings.
Okay, so let's go. Everybody on board? And if you're more comfortable, who are you paired up with? You have to pair up with someone. Someone you know in the workplace. Who is not paired up?
I'm just listening. I'm just listening.
So you're just observing now? Alright, that's fine. We have to be paired up for it to work. You don't let the individual know what you're writing right now. What are you working
Can
on?
be positive, right?
Of course you don't want to be positive. Why would you want to go negative?
Coming back?
Yes.
Yes, because you have to confront the individual. You have to learn, you have to have difficult conversations. Yes, you have to choose someone. It is going to be emotionally charged, but that's the nature of it. So don't shy away from it. Let's do it.